Hi, everybody. My name is Pedro Crespo, the operations manager for GSD Solutions. Today, I am joined by Cecilia from Slides with Friends. Cecilia, welcome.
Hi, Pedro. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you. So, Cecilia, tell me a little bit more about yourself, about Slides with Friends, and how you've been coping with this virtual world.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So a little background about me. I am an entrepreneur. I've been running tech businesses for the last 8 years or so. I come from a background before that of branding, marketing, and design. And the company that I'm currently running, Slides with Friends, I'm co-founder and COO. And we are basically an interactive presentation tool. So we work a lot in this virtual events space. So over the past year or so since we've launched, I have learned a ton about what makes virtual events work, how to make them better, and why they can be better than in-person events. So I'm excited to talk with you about all of that.
So, Cecilia, why can they be better than in-person events?
Yeah. So virtual events, there is actually, so I know people talk a lot about how hard they can be. Zoom fatigue is a real thing. Staring at the screen all the time is a real thing. But if we can work with those limitations, we can actually find ourselves having a better time than we would in like a 30-person meeting in a room. And I think one of the most important things that we can do in virtual events and in large group events in general, even whether they're hybrid or in person or totally remote, is to enable people's voices to be heard. And I think that's one of the great things about virtual events is that you can bring people up front and center in a way that you really can't in real world stuff. Like if you're in a big conference room, it's really hard to have one person unless they're going to like trudge up to the stage. But with virtual events, it's much easier to do it. It's much easier for people to feel involved if you give them a mechanism, if you give them a way to participate. So I think that's the second best thing about virtual events is that if you have people watching you and you give them a way to participate, then they're going to be much more involved than they might be if they were just in a room of 30 people that you are kind of ignoring because you have to have the floor necessarily in order to control the event. So that's kind of what we do with Slides with Friends. It's a tool that lets you give your audience a voice, virtually, remotely, hybrid, whatever you want to do. So that's I'm a real big believer in that. And we kind of designed the tool around that idea of the more everybody in your group can have a voice, the more engaged they're going to feel, and the more they're going to feel like they can participate, and therefore the more interested and involved they're going to be in your content.
So when the pandemic started, were you already experiencing a big boost in the use of Slide with Friends? Tell me how Slide with Friends transition from the non-virtual world to the virtual world.
That's a good question. Actually, when the pandemic started, we had not started Slides with Friends. So I was running a different tech startup that took a real hit during the pandemic. It was a real world services app startup. And we went from doing, almost $1 million in annual revenue to like a third of that. It really was, we were doing like that. So it was kind of a silver lining. It was a really tough business, and we ended up needing to build some things for the business because we all went remote. The whole team went remote. We were in multiple cities, and everybody all of a sudden couldn't work in the main office. We had to have remote meetings, and we had to have remote onboardings and trainings for all of our new people that we were bringing in as well. So we ended up kind of pivoting into this thing where we built the ability for that to happen, the ability for these like live trainings, live quizzes, live onboardings, live meetings, interactive meetings to happen. And when we built that, we were like, oh, this is incredibly useful, not just for us and our team, but we also ended up using it for with our friends over during quarantine because we couldn't see anybody. So we ended up playing like a weekly Quizzo night with it. And it ended up just being something that we were really proud of. And we thought this could be something that could help other people the same way that it has helped us. So we kind of made it bigger, more strong, and put it out there as a real solution. And it's been growing for the past year and a half.
Yeah, I found myself playing a lot more trivia games than I ever had in my life in the
Yeah.
first 2 months of
Oh
quarantine
my
with,
gosh.
with all my friends. So, what advice do you give to the average person who is, feeling down because they just have to have all these Zoom meetings, all these conference calls over video?
Yeah.
What can they do to, inspire themselves to be happier or to continue doing it?
Yeah. So there's a ton of ways to help you yourself as an individual beat Zoom fatigue. And there are also really important ways that people who are running events can help you do that. And I would say for the individual, there's a few like surprisingly simple things that you can do. The first big thing I'm going to recommend for the individual is if you're in a Zoom call, you can turn off your self view. You don't have to stare at yourself back at yourself while you're talking. So Stanford Research Lab did a big study, and they found out that one of the most tiring things about Zoom calls is that repeat stare back at yourself. It does a few things. It's a higher cognitive load for you because you are, processing your own image back at yourself. It's more physical load for you because you're like, oh, I have to make sure that I'm in the box, I'm in the right place. You can't move around. That's physically tiring. So one of the most relieving things that you can do, honestly, is all you have to do if you're in Zoom is find your own video box, hover over it with your mouse. A little menu will pop up, like 3 dots. Just click on it, and then there's a box that says turn off self view. I was nervous to do that at first. And I was like, well, but what if I have something in my teeth? What if I look funny? And then I was like, I'm just going to try it. They say it helps. I turned it off, and the relief was actually kind of palpable. Like I felt as though I was more free to be in the call, to be watching the person who was actually talking versus like trying to make sure that I was doing the right thing in the box. And it kind of mirrors the way that we interact as individuals in real life, because you're not looking at yourself in a mirror
Exactly.
talking to somebody, and that would be very distracting.
It's like you still have the thing in your mouth when you're talking to your colleague in the conference room.
Exactly. So it really helps. It makes it feel a little bit more personal and a little bit more real as opposed to this kind of distanced world that we have created. So that's one of the most simple things you can do on a day-to-day basis to help relieve Zoom fatigue. Another really super helpful one that I have found, and actually the Stanford research study found this very surprising. There are tools that you can get, like home office tools, where they are going to make you more relaxed in a Zoom call. And you're going to be surprised by it. They found that having an external keyboard was one of the big things that you could do because it frees you from the space. So I can still be talking to you here, but I can step back. I still have my keyboard. I can still interact and I can still do things, but I'm not tied in. I'm not hunched over my little box. So I'm free. I can step back. I can set my screen up further away from me than I would necessarily be able to if I were on just a laptop. So this is, again, a freedom of movement, a freedom of feeling like you aren't physically controlled by that Zoom box. So I think those are the two things that I would say for any individual. Pretty easy to do. You can get an external keyboard for $20 on Amazon, and you can turn off your self view for free. So, oh, you're muted. Sorry.
When you turn off the camera, I think it really is going to help me, begin processing what I'm actually want to get across to people a lot better than me just constantly staring at myself, wondering, hey, am I doing something wrong? Does it look fine behind me? And that free movement that you're talking about when you have the external keyboard, I think really does help. I mean, I have an external keyboard and an external mic, and being able to like lean back as I would in a conference room on my chair and like move without fearing that I'm going to change anything on the screen really does help.
Yeah.
So for companies or for teams that are having to continuously have employees on these virtual calls, what do you think they can do to help relieve the employee's stress or the employee's fatigue?
Yeah, ton of things you can do. It seems hard at first, but once you understand just like the basics of human necessity, it gets a lot easier. So I think one of the first most important things that you can do is make sure that everybody feels like they can be heard. So number one, don't let the loudest voice control the Zoom call or the remote or hybrid event. Just make sure that you give everybody a chance to speak. So that can be really hard in large group settings, especially remotely. So if you have like a Zoom call with 50 people, having the expectation for any person to unmute themselves and talk is just not going to fly like in that large group setting, right? So what you need to do is enable ways for people to participate that are non-disruptive, that have a very low barrier to entry. So simple things like having a chat on in the Zoom, having a live running question that people can answer while they go, or our tool specifically has some fun things that we built in just for this. For instance, there's a soundboard reaction. So if someone thinks something's funny, but they don't necessarily, want to have themselves off mute and laughing, they can just press the little emoji and it'll send a little laughing sound. Little things like that, where you enable people to interact with a lower barrier to entry, makes people feel safer to interact. And that gets us what we really want, right? Which is engagement and interest in what you're talking about. The more I feel like I'm a participant and the more I feel like I can interact with you and actually have a voice in what's going on, the more I'm going to engage with you. Just in general, it's just human nature, the way that works. So there are a ton of tools you can use for that, like Slides with Friends, like Zoom Chat. You can also use other softwares that I love, for instance, like Remo is a great platform where people can be at different tables and they can walk around and join each other in these different tables remotely. So there's a ton of that stuff. I'm happy to send out a list of great software that we know of that really works.
Yeah, I'm sure our participants would like to see that list. We work a lot with Remo. It's an amazing virtual platform, and it's very interactive and very human-like in terms of being able to network within pockets or in groups of people and feel like you're in an actual room versus separated
or at least
from
a little
the
bit
world.
more, right?
Exactly.
And I think one of the nice things about that is it counteracts one of the main things that causes Zoom fatigue, which is that feeling trapped. Like if you can't just up and leave a Zoom meeting, but you can up and leave a remote table and go somewhere else, and no one's gonna be like, oh, that they left.
Yeah. We'll just blame it on a technical issue.
Yeah, my internet.
I had to step away. Yeah, I think being able to step away from the call, from the video chat, it's really helpful. It gives you a bit more clarity, specifically when you're negotiating something. I mean, in negotiations class, I took a negotiations class, and they told us, you have to go to the balcony, come up here, take a breath, take a couple of seconds to yourself to really clear up what you're trying to say and make sure that you're sticking to the points that you want to make at the table, and then come back.
Yeah.
So what do you think is something harder to deal with? Fatigue in person or fatigue over Zoom or fatigue over the virtual world?
That's an interesting question. I think they both come from the same base issue, which is that you get tired. And I think that going back to your last question about what can companies and event facilitators do to kind of avoid this, it's the same thing in person and on remote things. You need to expect that people have a limited attention span, because we really do. It's human to be able to pay attention to something very, very closely for maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes before you're like, okay, I need to check out. I need to handle my physical self. I need to, I need to take a bathroom break. I need to breathe. I need to think about something else because I've already worn this pathway. So I think one of the tough things that we deal with fatigue is universal, and it doesn't matter whether you're remote or in person. You still need, I think, important things to remember are to give your people a break. So if you have an hour-long talk, you should build a break into the talk. I have several events that I run, and I build in, I have a slide that's like, okay, can you stand up and stretch? Because you've been sitting for how long, and when was the last time you moved from your computer? And so I think that's one of the harder things about the remote stuff, is that you might you might, be getting people in to your call who've already been 4 hours staring at their screen, right? Versus an in-person thing, at least they walked into the room recently. So
yeah, exactly. It's like they were able to get a little stretch in before having to sit down.
Exactly. So when I do run virtual events, I will often toward the beginning and then in the middle build in like a, hey, can you stand up and stretch with me? And I'll do it with them, and I'll and that it wakes people up. It makes them feel better. And you just have a happier participant, which in the end is really what we want, right? Because we want people to enjoy our events or our meetings, and it's hard to get them to do that. So
yeah. Cecilia, do you have a demo for Slides with Friends that
I do.
you want to share?
Sure. If you have a smartphone, we could play a little game.
Oh, let's do that.
Let's do it. All right. Let me see.
I don't know that our participants will be able to see it, but I'm happy to do it.
Well, we'll see. Let me see here. I have a little Beat Zoom Fatigue event. Let me just spool it up and I'll just show you kind of what the thing does. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Yeah, it should be at the bottom of your screen.
Window, share.
There you go.
Okay, cool. So this is one of our event decks, and I'm just going to advance here. And if you have a smartphone, you can just take it out and hold up your camera to the QR code, and you can just join in the event. So I'm going to join.
Let's see how this works for me.
We'll see.
Oh. I guess it doesn't want to work for me.
Oh, I
don't have the QR code.
Oh, if you just go to a browser and go to slideswith.com/river,
Okay,
it'll go to the same place.
Slideswith-river. Okay.
There you go. Oh, Georgie came. Hi, Georgie.
There you go.
Right. This is just a little preview, because this can do a ton of things, but yeah, you can join anytime, by the way, Pedro, at slideswith.com/river. So if you go there, it'll just take you in.
All right, I'm here.
So the fun thing about this is you can just basically make this into a interactive event where you just have people send in responses to things. You can ask like poll questions. How many remote meetings do you attend on an average day? Like, is it a lot? Is it a little? And then you can see if people have responded down here by their little avatars. And you can just kind of get, oh, you got in. And you can kind of get a feeling for, what's actually going on with your participants. You can make people feel like they have a say in what's going on, which is a super important part. You can make a word cloud, and then you can send in and vote for other people's words. So just all the kinds of like little, absolutely. And then I'm going to vote for Sleepy, Tired, Hungry, because it's absolutely true. So that's kind of the gist of Slides with Friends. And then one of my favorite parts about it is that you can send little sound responses. I don't know if it's going to share my audio here, but
yeah, I see it. I hear it.
But you can have people send in just really anything that you like.
That's pretty cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
I definitely heard the little sound when you made the emoji, and this is definitely cool. We may have to use this with our employees when we're having our group chats.
Yeah, it's been very helpful, and it doesn't have to be the whole presentation, but it's a great way to kind of create that ability for people to participate, and like interaction and participation. If you walk away from this interview understanding one thing about how to run a great event, it's make sure that you have interaction and participation, because that is kind of the bedrock of engagement. And if you want an engaged audience, you have to give them a foothold. You have to give them a way to come in and either participate or feel like they are being heard, because that's the best way for any human to connect with any other human.
So what do you say is well, your advice, what is the best advice that you can give to someone, to an events coordinator who's transitioning from the in-person world to the virtual world? What's the best advice?
Transition from the in-person world to the virtual world. I would say that it's super important to remember that you have a limited time span, again, with your meeting. So if you want to have, for instance, a meeting that might have been a very easy, like drop by someone's office and talk for 5 minutes about, with another coworker about whatever you were talking about. If you want to do that kind of thing, make sure that you plan it first. It's easy to be like, oh, we're gonna all, the three of us are gonna hop in the conference room when you're in the office. But if you don't have that, then creating a plan for what you're going to talk about, or an agenda, and making sure that everybody who's going to be talking knows what that is. That's super, super important. And valuing people's time, because it can feel, especially when you go virtual, that it's like, oh, well, you can just hop on a Zoom call anytime because, we're not here together. So the same way you wouldn't like barge into someone's office and be like, hey, I need you right now. The same thing with Slack, the same thing with these meetings. Make sure that you are valuing and respecting people's time, I would say, is one of the big important things.
I think sending out the agenda ahead of time, or at least a couple of minutes before, so that they can quickly take a glance at what it is that you want to speak of, definitely helps improve the flow of the conversation. We're not wasting time there, just trying to figure out our bearings, like what are we doing here?
Exactly.
And
An
it
agenda
really
to me
helps get
says
things.
that you have respected my time.
Exactly. It says to me that you're serious about what you want to talk about, and it gives me an opportunity to come up with questions if I have any questions about those things on the agenda.
Yeah.
So, Cecilia, how do our friends and participants here today, how can they join or use Slides with Friends?
Yeah. All you have to do is just go to slideswith.com or slideswithfriends.com. It's basically, it's just a platform kind of similar to PowerPoint or Google Slides, where you just drop in and you can create your own presentation. It's free to use the builder. It's free to play a game with up to 10 players. If you want to do larger groups, you have to sign up, but otherwise it's a pretty robust freemium model where you can really try it out with your friends, with your small group. You can make your own deck. There are a ton of pre-made game decks that you can play. So we've got trivia night game decks, or meeting icebreaker game decks, or company check-in, employee wellness, meeting kickoffs, just all kinds of different kinds of pre-made decks that you can just kind of grab and make it your own, or just play it as it is. A lot of people love to grab pre-made ones and then just kind of tweak them to their own, change the title, put their brand on it, and move forward. And we love that, because I get to see some fun things that people change, and when they make things from scratch, it's amazing, because I get to I get all kinds of fun ideas from how people could use the tool that I would have never thought of. So go ahead and try it out. It's slideswith.com, where you can really just create any kind of interaction that you like and any kind of event that you like.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm gonna let you have the last word. What do you think the event industry can do moving forward to just improve the overall human experience?
Yeah. I think they're doing it. I think there are so much new software, and there's so many new tools out there that are really trying to find that space that is going to be that perfect mixture between the in-person event, the remote event. I think hybrid is going to happen. I think there's going to be a lot of this is a conference. You can come to the conference, or you can join in on this specific talk, and there will be people in person and there will be people remote. I think that we're still figuring out how to do that, but I think once we have figured out how to make that kind of mixed group work well together, and I have some thoughts about that as well. And I think that the most important thing for that sort of mixed group is to make sure that every participant feels equal, whether they're not there or in the room, giving everybody that voice. And so that would be the best thing that I think, especially for hybrid events, that the events industry can do.
That sounds totally on point, and I believe it 100%. But thank you so much, Cecilia, for your time, for sharing slides with friends, with our friends, and for giving us a preview of how it works and how it can help us improve our virtual experience.
Thank you,
We
Pedro. I
can,
really appreciate it this time.
yeah. Talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks, everyone.